Hello, everybody. Welcome to Take the Black Live, the only show on the internet where we talk about all things sci-fi, fantasy, movies, TV, books, monster hunters, authors who take a long time to write their works, wheels, time, and so forth. I am Dan Selcke, the editor of winterscoming.net, and I am here with Daniel Roman, the other editor of winterscoming.net. How are you, Daniel? How are you, Julie? How's everyone out there watching? Leave us a comment, leave us a like, leave us a subscribe, talk to us. We'll talk back.
Yeah, hello. Good to see you, Dan. Good to see you, Julie, in the chat, and everybody else who's here. I'm good. It is hopping in Fantasyland right now. We have,
Always.
some weeks we do this show every week for you listeners who've never tuned in before. Maybe there's one of you out there, but we do this show every week where we talk about all this stuff and the latest and greatest and most exciting fantasy sci-fi news stuff. And some weeks, I don't want to say we're like sifting for nuggets or whatever, but it takes a little, we have to think a little more about what we're going to talk about. This week, there's just a ton of stuff. So we have a lot to go over today on basically like all of the big four fantasy franchises of the moment.
I disagree with you, though. I feel like every single time I start this off with, we have a big show for you today, and I always mean it. I always think we have a giant thing to tackle. It always feels that way to me. And I don't have the perspective to know otherwise. But Daniel, what's one of the things we're talking about today?
Well, we are going to begin as we so often do in Westeros, which we've got only positive Westeros news this week, I think.
True.
Which is wonderful. So George R.R. Martin, the author of A Song of Ice and Fire, the series that spawned Game of Thrones, yada, yada, yada. He took to his blog this week to talk about the new Game of Thrones spinoff that is coming later this year, which is A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, based on Martin's Duncan Egg novellas, and this season is doing the first one of them, The Hedge Knight. So Martin has seen all 6 episodes, and he has opinions. Dan, you've seen the opinions. Do you want to read any of these? How did you feel about them? Where do we go from here?
I'll go ahead and treat everyone to my George R.R. Martin impression and read a little bit of it.
I don't have one.
The takeaway is he likes it. I've seen all 6 episodes now, the last 2 in rough cuts, admittedly, and I loved them, he said. Duncan Egg have always been favorites of mine, and the actors we found to portray them are just incredible. And I like what he said about how faithful the show is to his work. It's as faithful an adaptation as a reasonable man could hope for. And you all know how incredibly reasonable I am on that particular subject. Viewers who are looking for action and more action and only action, well, this one may not satisfy you. There's a huge fight scene here, as exciting as anyone could ask for, but there are no dragons this time around, no huge battles, no White Walkers. This is a character piece, and its focus is on duty and honor, on chivalry and all it means. So I like that because we now know there was this flap last year where George R.R. Martin basically came out on his Not a Blog and got pretty critical of the direction that the other big Game of Thrones prequel series, House of the Dragon, is going in, dinging it for straying too far from the source material. I think an opinion that a lot of fans sort of felt, or at least I felt that, because I know I didn't like the second season as much as the first, and I've been trying to catch up for reasons why. And he articulated some of the vibes that were kind of going around. So if he didn't like it, if he didn't like this new one, A Knight of Seven Kingdoms, he would have either said so or said nothing. So I think it is a good sign that he's out here openly talking, saying he loves it. And that matches what we've basically heard, right? From our little sources behind the scenes.
Yes, totally. I heard rumbles that he and his team, that people were pleased with it when I interviewed him last year. And so that has kind of been a growing, kind of snowballing, I don't want to say narrative, but like it's more and more, every time he's talked about it, it's been a little bit more about how much he likes it, how happy he is with it, how faithful it is, which is like, if Duncan Egg was an unfaithful adaptation, there's no hope, because like you said, this was not big, sprawling, budget
Mhm.
intensive story where there are dragons, and how can we do all of the battle scenes? Like he said, this is a character driven story. It's a much smaller piece than
Mhm.
A Song of Ice and Fire or Fire and Blood. But that's not to say there won't be any action. Like he said, there's one big fight scene. I really hope they do it justice because it's a good one. I imagine it's probably going to be in the 5th episode. He said he's seen I believe rough cuts of all.
Final
He's
2.
seen all of them. Yeah, rough cuts of the final 2. I imagine episode 5 will have the big fight scene.
Sure.
And it's a rough cut because they're still cutting it together because it'll be big and cool. But yeah, so this is very exciting, and I feel like maybe a W, like a win, that Martin and HBO's relationship with Martin and the television universe of Game of Thrones have needed, because yeah, there were some issues with House of the Dragon season 2, even as it had some incredible episodes.
Totally.
I think the creative liberties that the team making the show took, or the team making the show took, became
Were bad.
a little more pronounced. Yeah, some of them were not great. A lot of them were just different, to the point where it almost started to feel like it's telling a different story in some ways, even as it includes a lot of big events. So sounds like we're going to avoid that with Duncan Egg, which is great.
I have a very good feeling about this show. I feel like it's going to, at minimum, be like really please the crowds.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about why that's so important a little later, because I do think that it could have an interesting place in like the ongoing story of the post Game of Thrones TV sci-fi fantasy genre boom. But we'll get to that in a little bit.
That's
He also-
interesting. I'm
What?
excited for that conversation because I feel like something clicked in my brain as you said that. And yeah, I want to talk about that because I think you're onto something there.
He also mentioned it might come out in the fall. He mentioned we'll go on to season 2 and do what the hell's the next one
The
called?
Sworn Sword.
The Sworn Sword. I wouldn't trust that though.
The Sworn Sword.
I wouldn't take that as like, oh, season 2 is definitely happening. I don't think they decided that yet. And Martin has been known to kind of, not speak out of turn, but just kind of say what he thinks. I don't think that's confirmation of season 2. We'll see.
I agree.
It probably will be in the fall, though. I'm looking forward to it. It'll be a nice time, and we'll talk about it more in a little bit. Some good comments. I agree that Victor, it's going to be. I finally get to read these books now. I have not read the Knights of the Kingdom book, and now that you and I are done talking about the Shadow Rising, I can finally do it. I'm so looking forward to it. I'm going
It's
to.
a good one.
I'll tell you all about it.
Yeah, and they're short. They're only 100-ish pages each, 150 pages each. These are good little bite-sized stories. So this is an instance where the 6-episode season, I wouldn't want it to have more episodes. It's perfect for the story they're trying to tell.
I agree with Julie. If it works out as well as it sounds it will, it just proves that you stick close to the source material, things should work well. Which I do think is a good. It's complicated, right? Like,
yeah,
with something like the Wheel of Time, I've talked about this before. I do think it's about having like the alchemy of the right people and the right material. Like, I think there are times when you probably do need to change things and change things in a not tiny way. Like, if I were making the Wheel of Time, I'd probably change a lot. But if I were making House of the Dragon, I would stick a lot closer than they're sticking because I think the material's really strong and good enough to support it. I think it really depends on the story. I remember I did not see the 50 Shades of Grey movie, nor did I read the book. But I understand that the movie was a step up because they looked at the book, which is, I don't want to insult it too much as I haven't read it, where it's kind of like a trashy sort of silly fanfic thing. And they're like, okay, how do we make this into like a Hollywood movie that kind of has more integrity to it? I don't think it's necessarily bad to change source material, but I think it depends on what you're adapting, on who you are, on the time you make it in. So many things to line up just so to get like a great adaptation. Although with George R. R. Martin, I do think the lesson is, stick to the book, stupid. It's not that hard.
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree with that. And I think that we've seen a lot of examples of that being the case, that, the Wheel of Time is a great one because they have to change things, right? They're doing it in 8 seasons. There is
Yeah.
no way they can do the books as written in that amount of time. Like, full stop. I don't care what any haters on the internet say. It is just not feasible. So that's an instance where like they need to change things and have a vision. That's very different than like House of the Dragon, where they're changing things they maybe didn't need to, just to kind of fill time or give certain characters things to do. You know, deviating from the spirit of the thing. It's an interesting, naughty kind of issue to have. And I think like Last of Us is another example of the perfect instance of how it
Like
navigated that, because The Last of Us as a game, pretty much perfect. Like I really don't have much to say bad about The Last of Us as a game. But when they brought it to television, there were some spots like the Bill and Frank episode where they were like, we could probably do something that would be more compelling for television than what was in the game, which specifically worked because it was a game and it's a different medium.
Yeah.
So that is such a interesting line to thread. And I think one of the other lessons here is George R. R. Martin was a TV writer. That's not true for most of these things that are being adapted. So I think the justification for like maybe just stay close to what the dude wrote is a little bit stronger there, because I think there's a cadence to his books that translates better to TV than like, say, Brandon Sanderson.
I agree. Ooh, when someone adapts Brandon Sanderson, I can't wait to have that discussion about adaptations.
Me too.
We're going off topic here a minute. We'll move on in a second to the Wheel of Time stuff. We have some new images. Did you, in this big deadline piece I wrote about, I'll write this up later, they had a bit where they were talking about like why seasons are shorter nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
And they said that according to our understandings, according to the guy who makes The Last of Us, season 2 is 7 episodes, but season 3 will be significantly larger.
Yeah.
FYI.
I'm excited by that. I think that makes sense. I saw that too in that deadline article, and I was like, oh man, that makes me happy to hear it, because I could understand. So, you know, when Ryan Condal is the showrunner of House of the Dragon, when he said that season 2 was shortened for story-driven reasons, the minute I read that, I was like, oh, you are towing the line to not piss off the corporation that is HBO here.
Which is his job.
Which is his job.
Yeah.
No shade to Ryan Condal. It is his job. But I knew when I read it wasn't entirely true either.
Shit, yeah.
And The Last of Us, again, is the opposite, where when they've said 7 episodes felt right to them to break for that season, like knowing the game, because I have played the game, I believe that. I'm like, all right, I believe you that that's the right place to pause. And if they are pausing around where I think they might be, they're going to need a bigger season 3 to tell the whole story. So exciting stuff.
Yeah, there is no one size fits all for this thing. For adaptation, it really is a case by case basis. You got to like go at it one at a time. Before we move on really quick, Victor asked if we've seen the House of David trailer. I haven't. I saw that it was floating around. I put it in our little worksheet, but I just haven't been able to get to it. There is something interesting to me about the idea of like, what if we made a show based on the Bible, but with like the production of Game of Thrones? I kind of like that. It hasn't really worked so far. They tried a couple of years ago, but hey, if we can have a big action adventure Bible series on Amazon Prime Video, I'm not saying I'm not interested.
I will say I am not interested. But that's just me personally. I'm not here to shade the Bible on our podcast. But that is very much not my jam. So I have not seen the trailer. I doubt I will be watching it.
House of David. Okay, but something you did see is a bunch of new images from The Wheel of Time, season 3.
Yes.
Woo! Coming up in March, the 3rd season of this adaptation of Robert Jordan's fantasy epic 14-book strong novel series. I think you and I are both looking forward to this a lot. I think this show is on an upward trajectory. I feel like it is the standard bearer for the big epic fantasy shows these days. House of the Dragon's also a great one.
Should be.
It is a legendary. It hasn't been around that long. It's like 1990 or whatever, but it has a large print on the culture, and fans have been waiting for a long time to see it. And I know that I am on the joy train for it. So Daniel, what are these new images that we're looking at from The Wheel of Time season 3?
Yeah, so the new images that got released today, they were all around this new location we're going to be visiting in season 3 called Tanchico, which is basically like a seaside city. It's set on these peninsulas, these 3 peninsulas that jut out into a bay. It's the capital of, I believe, Terabon is the name of the nation. And a few characters go there. In the books, they're searching for members of the Black Aja. So if you've seen the Wheel of Time season 2, those are the Aes Sedai that serve the Dark One. Some of them run to this city, Tanchico, and then some other characters go searching for them. So they have a very distinctive style here, which really slaps in the images. So this first one, we have, so from left to right, Min, Matt, Donal Finn is Matt, right there in the front, and then behind Matt is Elaine Tricond. Yeah, you can just see her head peeking out there. So yeah, they're all wearing these distinctive like face veil things that are part of the Terabon like style fashion. I can't tell if Matt is in disguise as a woman here, which I think he might be, or if he's just rocking like nobleman's garb, because men and women wear these face veils.
We looked it up. Men wear the veils in there. I agree with Julie. I love the costumes too.
Yes.
The show goes very hard on fantasy costumes, which I appreciate.
Yeah. Sharon Gillam, the costume designer, I feel like she's doing amazing work. She's really, really, they gave her, I don't want to say carte blanche, but they were like, look, Sharon, we need you to make some crazy shit. Can you do that? And she was up for it. So yeah, that's what this first image is. They're in a marketplace in Tanchico. So giving us our first look at the streets.
Why not? Transport me away.
Yeah.
We'll go back to this one, but let's do the next one, which is,
Yes.
same. Nynaeve, who is, by the way, who's your favorite Wheel of Time character, Daniel?
That's really hard to say, Dan. I feel like it depends on the point in the series because I like all of them more or less at different points. Nynaeve is up there though. I don't know that this has come through quite as well in the show, but in the book she has a great like unreliable narrator thing where Nynaeve in her head is the most stubborn, mule-headed, powerful person ever, but you can get like glimpses of like her insecurity shining through and like her uncertainty about stuff. Robert Jordan was really good at writing that kind of stuff with characters. But yeah, Nynaeve's always been one of my favorites though. How about you, Dan?
I agree that she isn't as good in the show, but in the books, my favorites were it was always a tie between Nynaeve and Loyal.
Nice.
Were two faves.
Yeah, I like Perrin a lot too. He's always been high on my list.
Wrong with Perrin.
But yeah, I assume this is, if not the same street as the previous shot we looked at, a similar one. The spokes on that like merchant stall thing on the left side of the image, they match. You can just kind of see those in the previous one, right on the left side of the image.
Cool.
So either that's the style of merchants in Tanchico, or it's the same street, same scene. And audio listeners, we're talking about images. Like, go watch us on YouTube. But yeah, shall we move on to the next one?
We shall.
Okay. So this, I believe the official description for this is just like residents of Tanchico. So we know basically nothing about this image, aside from that these are some piratey looking people living it up in Tanchico. And that is kind of the vibe of this town. It basically, I really like that. I think Nerdist had like the exclusive first look reveal for these Tanchico images. They actually went to the set and walked around it with the production designer, cool. Andre Nekvasil. And basically they talked about how Tanchico is a really ancient city that has kind of like fallen on harder times in recent years. So it's like, it's got this very proud history stretching back centuries, but now it's kind of being overtaken by like ruffians and pirates and stuff, especially like the dockside districts. So that's what we're seeing here. Piratey people.
I love that the show is committed to showing us that kind of other world. I like that. I feel like, fantasy is such a rich genre, and there are so many invented cities, landscapes, castles, times. It's good to just see someone go whole hog and build these big sets. I mean, we'll lose if the Fantasy Revolution dies. Anyway, next one. Yeah, I know totally. That you have of relation to your forever and always favorite show.
That's right. That's right. There is. So this is like a dockside district
Yeah.
shot of Tanchico. And so Tanchico, they filmed in Cape Town, South Africa at Cape Town Film Studios. Another show which very famously filmed in Cape Town, South Africa
Very
is
famously.
very famous, extraordinarily famously filmed there.
Uh-huh.
Is Black Sails, the
Uh-huh.
Stars pirate drama, which I have an unrelenting love for. And apparently, the Wheel of Time for Tanchico, they actually used some locations that Black Sails used, so some stretches of beach in the same spots. And they also used a basic dock set that was left over from the show that Black Sails, I guess, had built for Black Sails, and they built on top of it to make the Wheel of Time's Tanchico dock set. I think that's what we're looking at here, because if this is not from Black Sails, this dock, it looks similar enough that I can't tell, and I've seen Black Sails a lot of times. So that's the vibe they're going for, and I love that for them.
If you weren't going to watch The Wheel of Time before, you definitely are now. One Piece also films in Cape Town. Is that just where you go to film pirate shows?
Pretty much, yeah. I feel like it has. So if I remember right, Cape Town Film Studios was like a revolutionary, like first of its kind studio in South Africa.
Okay.
So it has very much been trying to make a name for itself for filming these kinds of settings. And they didn't just film Tanchico in South Africa. I believe they also did parts of the Isle Waste, like Ruidian was also South Africa.
Right.
Yeah, Ruidian. That place where they go to get visions. They got those visions in South Africa. But yeah, so those are our first look images at Tanchico. Highly recommend. We've written about this on winteriscoming.net. Nerdist has the walkthrough with the production designer. Highly recommend checking all that out.
I mean, I have to ask you this. So,
Yes.
Richard, could we go back to the first image in that set of 4? This has actor Donald Finn as Matt, dressed in all kinds of crazy veils and garbs. Now, you and I have read The Shadow Rising, the 4th book.
Yeah.
This is going to be based on. Spoiler alert, plug your ears, put your head under a pillow, leave the room.
We're going to go into Shadow Rising spoilers. Is that what we're going to talk about here?
Not a giant one.
Okay.
Basically, so in The Shadow Rising, in this book, a bunch of the characters go to Tanchico, this port city, to look for the Black Aja. Others go to the Isle Waste to help Rand win over the people there. Perrin goes back to Emmons Field, a little homecoming. There's a lot of different plots. Matt, the character in this photo, Donald Finn, Matt Coffin. That was like Matt Coffin when I heard the audiobooks and thought it was like kind of like, dark-sided like that. But Matt Coffin in the books goes to the Isle Waste with Rand, but in the show does not. Apparently goes to Tanchico with Nynaeve, Elaine, and I guess Min in the show. How big of a change is that, Daniel? And will people be upset? Should people be upset? Should fans be mad?
It's so hard because the Wheel of Time has changed a lot from the books, partially because they've needed to, because they recast this actor Matt near the end of the first season.
Yeah.
By necessity, they rewrote basically like all of season 2. It's really hard because I feel like they've won my trust in the way they've worked a lot of these changes around. Like, I remember feeling this way about Moiraine losing her powers. I was like, that's a really bad decision, and I hate that. And then the way they resolved it, it was like they did it purposely to teach us about how people can tie off weaves of the one power, something that was thought lost. That's all like very dense lore stuff that we will need to know. Like this season, we will probably need to know that's possible. So like in retrospect, I'm like, I see why you did it now. I still don't love it for Moiraine, but I respect the arc of this more. So I am hesitant to be like, they changed Matt's storyline and that's terrible and we should all be upset, because I'm really curious what they're going to do with this. Because I do think Matt's storyline where he goes into the Isle Waste, he derps around a fair amount there. It's not like he's all doing crazy important stuff, but there are a few very important things that happen to him there. Namely at Ruidian, whatever.
The R town.
Yes, in the R town, which we have seen from the trailer, it doesn't look like he's going to be going to, at least not in the first instance with Rand, like he does in the book. So I have two thoughts about this. One is I still think they are going to try to get Matt's book stuff worked in somehow. It revolves around these two doorways that he sees. He goes through them. He meets these weird otherworldly beings called Eilfin and Eelfin. And they make deals with him, and there's a whole thing with it. And I feel like, so if I remember right, the first door he sees is in the White Tower. The second door he sees is at Ruidian.
I think it's the Stone of Tyr.
Stone of Tyr. You're right. You're right. Which we haven't seen in the show. We don't know if they're doing Stone of Tyr, but I doubt it. At least not at this point in the series. So I feel like they might do something really crazy, like have Matt find a doorway in Tanchico that shoots him out into the Aiel Waste or something. So that's why I'm not ready to like condemn this change, but I do think it's going to be really interesting to see how they navigate it, because they already foreshadowed the doorway stuff last season. With like the visions he gets where he sees himself hanging. So yeah. What do you think? Are you upset? You just read the Shadow Rising.
No, I'm not upset. I read the Shadow Rising. I'm curious. I'm not going to condemn it outright like you. I am more of like, why? Because I remember the Matt Rand dynamic from the Shadow Rising, because they have one. They pal around, they talk, they do stuff. I remember some moments of him in the Aiel Waste. And it's just curious, I hope they have like a reason for it. I don't know what it is yet, so it's hard to be sure what exactly is going to come of it.
Yeah, totally. That is, so the other thought that I had about this was I remember around the end of season 2, Rafe Judkins, the showrunner, basically talking about how they had to naturally deviate really a lot from Matt's storyline because of the recast. And that now, as of the end of season 2, he's in line with his book arc again.
Right.
So to see them then change it again right at the start of the third season, presumably, like the trip to Tanchico is not very late in the story. So I'm assuming this is going to happen in the first few episodes, first half of the season at least. So to then turn around and immediately send Matt to a different place that he goes to in the book after just talking about how now he could be on his book storyline again is kind of funny to me. But again, jury's out. They have won my trust enough that I will ride with the changes and see where they take us with them before I get upset.
Yeah, I'll go with it, but I'm watching them closely. This better have like a good reason for it.
It warrants a side eye. Yeah, totally.
Because you're right. It is weird that they were like thrown off course with Matt, and now they have a chance to get him back on this book track, and they're like, you know what we should do? Something else. But I'll be curious. It airs on March 13th. As Julie says, I really like Man and Rat together in Shadow Rising. Yeah, I did too. But I'm excited to see how this been the change. I am too. I have an open mind. I'm not condemning it, but I am curious.
Yeah.
Before we go on.
Also, can we just shout out Julie Davies? I didn't realize you had read The Shadow Rising. Awesome. Love that you've read the books.
Yeah, I didn't realize that either. Cool. My favorite pronunciation thing, Roydian versus Ruidian. I read the my absolute favorite pronunciation weirdness is I listened to the audiobooks for A Song of Ice and Fire once. I read them too. And Roy Dotrice pronounces her name Melisande instead of Melisandre. And I'm like, I'm always saying it that way from now on.
Like Frenchly, like he doesn't finish with the RE, just Melisande?
Like Melisande. Yeah,
wow.
He says it like that. It's like, ooh, Roy Dotrice.
That's
you imp.
So I believe, and I could be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure that the Mistborn names are like that too. Like I always said Kelsier and Vin, and it's really supposed to be, I'm pretty sure, like Van and Kelsier.
Van? It's an
I. I'm pretty sure. Don't come at me, Sanderson fans, but I believe I read that somewhere that the pronunciation's like that. Because it's supposed to be like Renaissance-y, you know.
Gotcha. Perhaps we'll find out someday if they ever adapt that. But will they ever be able to adapt that? With the kind of genre boom being where it is. It's our next topic. So
Yeah.
recently there was this report from I think it was like a Luminate Analytics is this kind of like data company. And they're talking about TV in 2024. And there was a lot going in there. They said kind of franchises are not the big drivers they used, but they mentioned that like Marvel shows and Star Wars shows are less popular. One of the big data points to kind of pop out and get some attention was that the second season of The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, was watched for 60% fewer minutes than the first season was, which is, I don't have to tell you, a significant drop. If your home drops in value by 60%, you have some issues. If your personal wealth is reduced by 60%, you're going to have to make some lifestyle changes. That's a significant drop, especially given that The Rings of Power is a famously huge spend. Maybe the biggest or one of the biggest, next to like Citadel, weirdly, or other shows I shouldn't throw money at. They spent tons and tons of money on this show, hundreds of millions of dollars, way beyond what you would normally spend. And for them to get that kind of return is, I'm sure they're not super happy. And then it made me think, well, it's been like months since the end of The Rings of Power Season 2. They haven't said a Season 3 is coming. I wonder if they're taking stock of their options. And really, I think there's a bigger evaluation going on right now because Game of Thrones happens, right? Game of Thrones is this big, giant phenomenon, 2011, 2019, takes over world, takes over TV. Everyone watches it. It's absolutely everywhere. The stars blow up. They get bad movie deals. It brings in tons of money. It's this giant, super generational hit.
Yes.
And then we have all these things that follow it. We have The Rings of Power and The Wheel of Time, both of which are kind of attempts for Jeff Bezos to famously have his own Game of Thrones. We have The Witcher on Netflix, his epic fantasy series. We have a lot of these big new epic fantasy series coming out. And not just that, I think it helps with big sci-fi shows too. Do I have examples? I don't know, not really. The Expanse or...
Yeah, that's a good one.
Even something as kind of different as Severance. I feel like it made it... Game of Thrones normalized spending a ton of money to make a really big, sweeping movie quality show.
Yeah.
We're several years out from that experiment. We're several years out from the shows that were kind of birthed by that, getting into their middle years. And there have been successes. House of the Dragon is quite a big success. The Last of Us Fallout, there have been successes, but there have also been, I don't think it hasn't turned in as much success as the folks who make these want. 60% loss of viewership between seasons 1 and 2. I guarantee you they don't want that. The Wheel of Time, I feel like because it's not quite as much of an expenditure, it has a good chance of getting renewed, and it's getting better and better. But quite frankly, I'm not convinced it couldn't get canceled if they don't think it's making the Mondo Botho bucks they want it to. And I guess the question is, are we coming to the end? Is in the next few years going to be the winding down of this big post Game of Thrones spend? And they're going to end the Rings of Power early, and the Wheel of Time, they're going to say, I really hope they go for the Wheel of Time. They're going to say, you know what, stick all the last 12 books into 2 seasons, and we'll call it there. The Witcher's wrapping up in 2 seasons, and they will be able to do the entire story there.
Yeah, as it should be. That is when The Witcher should wrap up.
And are we going to see that's sort of the end of this big fantasy boom? Which is, by the way, why when I hear Brandon Sanderson say I'm waiting for the right opportunity, I'm like, dude, the opportunity might be passing you by soon.
Well, I think that there are a few different elements to this. I think that I think both Victor and Julie are onto some things in the chat. So Victor said, I think we're near the end of the pendulum for the, quote, doing their own thing showrunners. Nah. The next it is going to be adapting things exactly as the audience / fans expect. I don't wholly jive with that. I think anytime you have adaptation, like fans are not right. I'm sorry. Very often we're not. I think of The Witcher season 3, where so many fans griped about how there weren't enough monsters and it wasn't faithful, even though it is the most faithful season of the television show, and they added a whole bunch of monsters that weren't in the book. Fans tend to be fickle, and they should not be dictating the direction of television shows, in my opinion. But I do think that maybe the trust in some of these, thinking about showrunners, Rings of Power is an interesting example where Prime is not really a television studio, and they got people who I'm pretty sure hadn't really done a television show before to do Rings of Power because they liked their.
Yeah, that was curious.
And then just didn't really have a lot of guidance for them. And the Rings of Power, I think the issue there is it isn't that people are sick of fantasy, it's that it's a really middling show. People are just not excited about it. Not to say the Tolkien lore hounds aren't having a good time, or the super fans of it aren't enjoying it, but I don't think it is really igniting the popular culture in any way. And when you have a Lord of the Rings thing, and that's the case, that's pretty telling that it's a you problem, right? It's not a source material.
Right.
It's not a problem with the thing you started with. It's a problem with how you're presenting it to people. I think that what Julie said, I think what it ruins it for these popular shows in general is the 2-year wait between seasons. It's just too long and people lose interest sometimes. I don't think that helps. I think we have examples of shows that can weather it, like a Stranger Things, perhaps, but
Squid Game.
And a Squid Game. But I think the justification for that creatively is high enough that fans are willing to run with it. It's not like for example, Silo just ended season 2 on a ridiculous cliffhanger. If they were taking 2 or 3 years to come back, people would be pissed. I don't think they're going to. Silo has been pretty snappy with production. They have been filming season 3 for months already. Yeah, they started in October of last year. So they've been pretty good with it. They've been a year and a half-ish between seasons. But yeah, I don't think the wait's helping. I think the period of throwing obscene amounts of money at these shows is probably coming to an end, because we've seen that throwing obscene amounts of money at them doesn't guarantee shit, except that you're spending obscene amounts of money. Game of Thrones famously didn't cost anywhere near as much as any of these shows.
Very true. I think I absolutely right. A couple of points I want to make. Yeah, I mean, you're right. The problem with the Rings of Power isn't that it's fantasy; it's that the show itself is kind of eh. But I think we should acknowledge that Hollywood doesn't take the right lessons from things.
Sure.
I guarantee you that they'll look at it and be like, "Oh, people don't like fantasy. That's the problem." Will be a not insignificant number of people.
You're not wrong.
And Victor says that the next big thing could be romantasy, mentioning a Court of Thorns and Roses show. Oh, you have opinions on that?
Yeah.
I'll take my thought, then I'll turn it over to you. I don't know as much about that as I could. I do think we're in for a change. I think you're right. I think the period of spending all this tons of money on these shows is over, because the money does not get you. It does not guarantee you great returns. It doesn't even guarantee you quality.
No,
which you would really hope. But why'd you sigh dramatically when I read Victor's comment about romantasy shows coming into vogue, like A Court of Thorns and Roses?
So romantasy was last year's publishing trend, and it's still going right now. But book publishing it loves a good trend, and all the publishers try to put.
Everyone loves a good trend.
Similar to they go very hard on the trends, and maybe because things aren't spaced out quite as much as CV. I don't know what. Last year, it was very noticeably the romantasy boom was the trend. I sighed because I nothing against those series. I think we probably will see some more romantasy adaptations. A Court of Thorns and Roses should probably get adapted at some point. That's a massive series with a massive following. Like, why not? But I think that comes back to what you were saying, Dan, about Hollywood learning the wrong lessons. So Brandon Sanderson talked about this, how in the wake of like Lord of the Rings, in his opinion, Hollywood took the wrong lesson, which was, let's do more fantasy. Yeah, me too. They were like, let's do more fantasy. Let's do stuff like the Golden Compass, or like they picked a lot of like
Aragon.
Aragon. They picked a lot of young leaning fantasy to replace Lord of the Rings, not really realizing. Yeah. Well, that's a whole separate thing than the search for more money. But yeah, not realizing that Lord of the Rings was appealing to, like, it was accessible to younger audiences, but it wasn't really like aimed at younger audiences the way something like a series which features a bunch of kids as the protagonists is. And I think if we were to say, the fantasy boom is struggling right now, people wish they had a new Game of Thrones, but we haven't quite nailed it, let's do romantasy. That is, again, kind of taking the wrong lesson of like trying to plug a specific like genre hole in the viewership with, it's like a round hole with a square peg, kind of like, because you're just choosing something not quite the same. I don't know why we haven't gotten a First Law adaptation. That seems like the obvious answer to me, because nothing I've read is as similar to Game of Thrones tonally as the First Law.
Well, I mean, the things that got made at the end of the day were big IP. Like Lord of the Rings is a huge name. The Wheel of Time is a bigger name than the First Law, definitely.
Yes.
It's hard to get like an original thing off the ground, even if it would be good. What you might be able to sell it as, and I like Ben Jack's comment here about budget restraints, leading to great creative solutions, of course, to stay focused.
Agree.
Is if you don't have to spend as much up front, you might be able to take a bigger risk on a show like First Law. And I do think we're getting into a point where we'll always see fantasy sci-fi stuff, but I think we'll see some cheaper stuff. I didn't realize that Agatha All Along, that Marvel show from last year, which was pretty good, frankly, the best Marvel show that I've seen in a while, cost $40 million for the entire thing, and they're like 9 episodes. Whereas that Secret Invasion Marvel show, which was a giant turd, had 6 episodes and cost like over $200 million. And I'm like, how? What did you spend it on? On those drab, boring hallways where nothing happens, and there's like 3 people in the cast? There are ways to do this for cheaper, which is why I think Another 7 Kingdoms could be a very good example of like a new model of a show to go forward. I wish there were more episodes, but it seems like it's a smaller show. It's smaller in scale. It's not like a big sprawling, the world's going to end if we don't band together. It's a set number of characters. A lot of it's going to be like character drama, like talking, and they'll be in fun outfits, and they'll have swords and stuff, but it'll be like a character drama with fighting. So no dragons, no White Walkers, something you can do on the cheaper. And if key, you could probably also do quicker, which could solve the 2-wait problem. I would be in favor of some kind of reset, because it is easy to forget. Game of Thrones epic show, it came out once a year, and it didn't cost even close to as much as the shows nowadays do when it began for a lot of its run.
Yeah, totally.
Like that is doable, and I think we'll have a reset to that. And I think I'm not so sure about romantasy. I just don't know it well enough. I think these video game adaptations are probably here to stay. We're going to get a bunch more of those if that ever burns itself out. Fallout and The Last of Us are both big hits. There's so many things out there that both have the name recognition that studios crave and a certain level of quality enough to make a good show out of. Would you watch a Final Fantasy TV show, Daniel? A well-made live-action Final Fantasy TV show?
I would watch it.
Angelina Jolie as a chocobo?
Only if it had Angelina Jolie as a chocobo. Yeah, I mean, I would watch it. That would not be the first thing I would say, hey, let's do this. And I say that as like Final Fantasy VII is probably my favorite game of all time. I don't know.
Timothée Chalamet is Cloud Strife. Come on.
Oh no, he is the twink we were promised, I guess. Yeah, I mean, I would watch any of those things for sure, but that's another one of those. I don't know that it's a great choice. I do think it's so funny to me. Like, I remember when we started covering the Wheel of Time here. I
Mhm.
don't remember who said this to us, but like, I'm so glad you guys are covering the wheel, like chose to cover the Wheel of Time. And it's like, it's the Wheel of Time. Like, it's a
It's a big one.
really famous fantasy series. I am not surprised that out of the bunch of big adaptations that have happened, that is the one that is kind of gradually rising to the top of the heap,
Mhm.
because like it should be. Like that is the series that should be getting this sort of adaptation effort versus just like a studio trying to cash in on name recognition with like another Lord of the Rings, another Game of Thrones, you
Which
know.
they are doing with the Wheel of Time, but it also happens to be a series that deserves it.
Exactly. And I think that makes the difference. And I to what you said about budgets, yeah, I think that is the reset that we need to in order to keep the fantasy boom going. We
Mhm.
need the reset of studios realizing you don't need to throw $1 billion at season one or whatever. Like you need a quality, like tight
Mhm.
team of people making television who know what the hell they're doing. And not to say the Rings of Power people don't. I'm just
Yeah,
speaking
of course not.
broadly here.
Game of
Um,
Thrones, the guys did not know TV that well before they started.
I often think about this. That Game of Thrones was the same sort of situation as Rings of Power, where it was
Mhm.
two dudes who were like a writing pair who wanted to do this really ambitious thing, but had never worked in TV before.
They
And
had great source material is the
well,
difference there.
no. So the difference there, they made the pilot. It was famously
True,
garbage.
yes.
Everything's famously this show. I don't know why. Famously, the original pilot was
Nerd
garbage.
famously.
So HBO turned around and assigned them a third, like, executive producer to help them remake the pilot and get the show off the ground, who was like a veteran TV person. So that's the sort of thing that like a studio like HBO
Sure.
with tons of experience would think to do, that I don't think Amazon would think to do if they had
Yeah,
issues with
yeah, yeah,
Rings of
yeah.
Power. So yeah, I hope that we get back to the era of making shows for a reasonable budget. Come on, Night of the Seven Kingdoms, and like letting people who really know how to make TV, like the dude who's doing The Boys, perfect example of this.
Oh, yeah,
Let
totally.
the people who know how to make TV, like give them some power to help you make your shows, because I think
Don't,
we need
like,
that.
turn down good talent either, 'cause
Of
as inexperienced
course.
as Benioff and Weiss were, they were inexperienced with TV, but that can be useful to, like, have an not a ton of idea of what you can't do, and
Sure.
so you go for something. Like, honestly, sticking as close as they did to the books is sort of not the norm, because
Yeah.
I feel like maybe they didn't have the blessedly, didn't have enough ego or confidence to just say, like, "Let's make it our own." So they stuck to the books. Also, the books were great, so that helps
Yeah.
a lot too. That did help.
Yeah. And they had
Yeah,
George R. R. Martin in the
it's
writer's room for the first half
yes,
of the show.
it's a rich tapestry. So yeah, everything's gonna go on. I think we'll see some changes, but I'm all for change. Vive la différence, Melisandre, and
Nice.
we will see where it goes.
Yeah, totally. And I don't think Rings of Power is going to get canceled, but we'll see. I think a lot hinges on season three, and I think
I
they,
think it might not make it all the way to their planned finish line, but I don't think it'll get canceled.
yeah, I think it's got to improve if it's going to make it that far. Middling isn't enough when you're spending the spaceship full amounts of money that they're spending on that show. But we'll see.
I also agree with Julie that I wouldn't mind waiting so much 2 years if, like, everything that came out was remarkable. But if you
Sure.
wait 2 years for the Rings of Power season 2, I mean,
That's why Stranger Things gets away with it, because like whether you love Stranger Things or not, they haven't really missed yet. Like
no, no,
every
they've missed.
season is like a quality season of Stranger Things, so people run with it. But they also have good capstones for their seasons, and I think that's a big part of it too. But
Totally. Just structure a thing, which I
yeah,
don't know. It's we got to move on, but just sometimes you watch and it's just you watch these things play out and you're like, how did you not think about why that doesn't work? But whatever. That's another
you're
matter.
talking about the
Um,
finale for House of the Dragon season 2, aren't you, Dan?
well, no, actually, I know why that one didn't really work
Oh,
out.
okay.
That's behind the scenes. More like the Rings of Power. Honestly, yeah.
Hmm.
Now thinking back on that one, like 2 seasons and like, I'm gonna call you Gandalf. Oh, who saw that coming? Nobody could have get. That's your big reveal. Go home. Go home.
Yeah, man. I will be happy when we can do away with the "and it was Gandalf," because you didn't see War of the Rohirrim, right?
I did not.
So it was an okay movie. Like, I enjoyed my time with it, but I'm not going to shout from the mountains about how great it was. But that movie also ended with a line that was talking about a wizard, and they were like, and his name, one of the names they know him by, is Gandalf. And it's like, you should have just not dropped the name, and it would have been better, probably.
What are we watching? I watched A Complete Unknown, that Bob Dylan movie, which is like perfectly fine. And like throughout the entire thing, there were like these people coming up being like, who are you? Oh, I'm blank. And I'm like, am I supposed to know who this is? Am I supposed to know what 60s musician this is? Because I don't. You're acting like I shouldn't be impressed. I don't know what you're doing here.
Way to shade Edward Norton.
I knew who Edward Norton was. There were they introduced him. They're like members of Bob Dylan's band who, like, I guess big fans know, but I don't care about. That movie
was Gandalf.
The name was Gandalf, and they can shred the bass. The movie was very, very fine, by the way. Okay, I want to tell one quick story. I was intrigued before I go on. The best part of A Complete Unknown was the guy sitting next to me in the theater was like a boomer age person, and the way his face lit up with joy when Johnny Cash came on the screen and did like his little "my guitar's a gun" bit. Who's played by the way, the Corinthian from The Sandman. He was pretty good. It's just like, this guy's having so much fun remembering what it was like when he was young and everything was exciting and Johnny Cash was the best. But the movie itself was like, okay, this movie was made because people think, isn't Bob Dylan neat? He's so neat. And that's the entire point for it. It was fine. Yeah. It was fine. It was fine. I'm also watching Severance and liking it a lot. And that's way more on topic. Really good, carefully paced sci-fi show that mixes kind of creepy and funny and thoughtful in just the right concoction. And I'm really liking it. And I've seen a lot more than you guys have, and it's very good.
Yeah, I've been really enjoying Severance. I'm watching that too. I did not get screeners, so I'm watching it as it comes out every week, and it's been great. My wife has been on a wicked kick. She just rewatched like all of season 1 in the past week. So like the theories are just flying around the house like constantly, and it's pretty fun. Like Severance, that's another show. It was like a 3-year wait, and like people didn't love the 3-year wait, but we're all back here for season 2 because it's been so good. So yeah,
it's better.
Cool. That's exciting to hear. The first 2 were kind of like the start. Like, it feels like it was almost a 2-part premiere because one episode was the innies and one was the outies.
Absolutely.
Now things can really start to move forward.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've been really enjoying that show. I can't really talk about it because I forgot that the review embargo is not up yet, but I can say that I have seen The Witcher Sirens of the Deep, which is the Witcher anime that comes out February 11th. And because I can't really talk about it, I will just say, if you like The Witcher, you as well will want to watch it on February 11th.
If we're light breaking embargoes, then I can say that I've watched the 3rd season of Invincible, which comes out in a couple of weeks, and the embargo isn't lifted on that yet. But I can say that if you like Invincible, you'll want to watch it.
There we go. That's hardly an opinion at all. Beyond that, I'm reading a few books. Grave Empire by Richard Swan. This is the start of a new trilogy after his Justice of Kings, that series. And it's kind of like a Napoleonic War type time period. Really cool book. Lots of dark fantasy. Scruffy's in the background. Audio listeners, go watch YouTube if you want to see Scruffy. I'm also reading The Devils, which is the new book by Joe Abercrombie that's out in May. This one is hilarious and dark and ridiculous. It's about a group of monsters who are contracted by the Pope in an alternate Europe
Mhm.
to go fight off the elves and keep them from invading the continent. So yeah, good. Joe Abercrombie's always a good time.
Pretty cool. Sweet. Lots going on. Lots to watch. For the YouTube Facebook people, I'll just say his name so he gets up. And audio listeners, you got to get on the video to see this crap. Scruffy, get up. No, Scruffy. There he goes.
He was sleeping.
He
Now
was.
he's not. What a
All right,
guy.
let's do the WiC News Lightning Round, where
Okay.
we go through a bunch of stories we couldn't get to by the show and give our 20-second opinions.
All right. I'm going to ask you first, I think. I didn't think I ordered these, but it looks like a natural order has emerged. So, Dan, a 6-part Gulliver's Travels series is in development. What's the deal
Yeah,
with
I
this?
think for like the BBC or something. Why not Gulliver's Travels classic? It's basically fantasy. A man travels around and meets some little people, some giant people, some horse people, and then goes back to England and learns that society is actually the chaotic, crazy place, ours. And he learns. I think wasn't Jack Black in a Gulliver's Travels thing recently? Whatever, it's coming back around.
You should be if he wasn't. I would watch that. I'm more interested in Jack Black Gulliver's Travels than anything you just said.
Fair enough.
About this other one.
Are you interested in though, Dan?
Yes.
There's a new TV show coming this summer called Alien Earth, the first ever alien TV show. Will you be watching that?
Jadedly, I will. I am really nervous about this show because it is a prequel before the first Alien movie, with an alien on planet Earth, which was the whole point of the movies, was don't let them get to Earth. So I am nervous. I will be watching it. It is out this summer. There is a new teaser. If you like xenomorphs, you should go watch it on YouTube. Boom. All right. I don't know if I knew about this. A jury cleared M. Night Shyamalan of charges that he plagiarized Francesca Gregorino's The Truth About Emmanuel for his show Servant. What's this about?
Frankly, you kind of said it all. Thank you for reading all those names. Yeah, M. Night Shyamalan, famous director of The Sixth Sense and so forth, it actually went to a jury trial that his Apple TV Plus show, which I never watched, like a horror show called Servant, starring Ron from Harry Potter, was accused of being plagiarized from this other filmmaker. And it got all the way to it, and the jury said, no, he didn't plagiarize. The twist is that he's innocent. And that was that.
You made us watch both these things and they were not the same. The jury came out and said.
Yeah, we have been robbed of our time. Daniel. Okay, this one is not terribly shocking, but Dark Horse Comics has dropped Neil Gaiman from their roster and cancels an ongoing graphic novel adaptation of his book Anansi Boys.
Yeah, so Neil Gaiman, sexual abuse allegations, really horrible. We talked about it a few weeks back if you want to go look back in the podcast. Dark Horse Comics was going to publish a graphic novel version of Anansi Boys, which is a spinoff of American Gods, to go along with the Amazon show of Anansi Boys that is presumably still coming out. They dropped it. They canceled it. They said, we take these allegations very seriously. Get out, Neil Gaiman. All right. Also, I just need to shout out before I read this. I agree with Julie, who said, now you should give Scruffy a treat, seeing as you interrupted his sleep.
I will do it. Once this is over, I'll get right on
that. Rain check that treat, Scruffy. Okay, so here's one for you, Dan. What's the deal with this? Fans apparently think Superman's face looks weird in the new teaser. Here's a picture of it. Hashtag fire James Gunn ?
That was trending for a while on X, the Everything app. Yes. I guess because he's a little wall-eyed looking, which is the opposite of cross-eyed, where like his eyes are like kind of to the side. James Gunn responded. He was like, when a fisheye lens just kind of sometimes looks like that. He said there are no special effects here. It's just his face. People are like, well, then why film when the fisheye lens looks like that? I think it looks fine. I'm still on board with that because dog, Scruffy the crypto dog. Daniel, we learned that Agatha all along talked about that will not have a second season, according to Patti LuPone, because the showrunner doesn't want to make one and is just doesn't do second seasons.
I think I like that showrunner Jack Schaefer. She also did WandaVision. I respect the creative decision here. I do think Agatha ended in such a way where they've got to pick those characters back up. Whether it's a show, whether it's a movie, whatever they do, I hope it does well. But those series really do come off like limited series, Agatha and WandaVision. So fine with it. Dan, I'm going to swap these next two on our list because I think you'd probably rather talk about one and I'd probably rather talk about the other. So Game of Thrones vets Kit Harington and Sophie Turner have wrapped filming on their medieval horror film, The Dreadful.
Yeah, Sophie Turner and Kit Harington, Sansa Stark and Jon Snow, in a horror movie set against the backdrop of the War of the Roses, the English war that inspired the War of the Five Kings in Game of Thrones. It all comes back round. She plays a country girl who's living with her mother-in-law, Marsha Gay Harden. He's a mysterious man from his past. He comes back to their farm. Crazy stuff happens. I don't know what it is. Out sometime. And finally, Daniel, The Witcher showrunner Lauren S. Hissrich has teased the possibility of more Witcher spin-offs after the main series ends.
Yeah, so Lauren Hissrich did an interview recently where she basically talked about how she felt very strongly that they should end on season 5 because that's the whole story. They'll do the whole thing. But it, quote, doesn't mean that all Witcher storytelling has to be done. I don't hate this, actually, even though I feel like I should, because The Witcher is often at its best when it does spin-offs and small stories. Like in the books, the games, kind of historically, it does well that way. So willing to give it a chance.
Very cool. And everybody, that is our show. That has been Take the Black Live. That has been WiC Live. We're here every week live on our YouTube page, our Facebook page. Come watch us. Come talk with us. We enjoy it. Also, listen to us in podcast form at iTunes, on YouTube Music, wherever you get your podcasts. Please leave a comment. I know all you out there are great at this. Love seeing your comments. Give us a like. That's how we tell YouTube to make us appear in the algorithms of other people. Well, lots of new friends every week. So give us a like and subscribe. Thank you for watching. Robert Harris says Servants good, which, yeah, I heard it was cool. I just, it's one of those shows that just I haven't got around to watching. It's just too much. Apple TV Plus needs more exposure. We'll talk about that maybe next week. So join us next Wednesday at 2 p.m. CST. And we'll give you more of what you need, what you want, and what you crave. See you then. Good night, goodbye, good luck, adios.
Take care, all.